Welcome back. Chinese state television has run a series of critical news stories about New Zealand infant formula products that are being sold in China. In one story, a Chinese reporter visits Auckland supermarkets with a list of New Zealand-made formulas that are sold in China. And she doesn't find any, which the reporter finds suspicious.
这是新西兰方面给我们传真过来的调查结果的，都是在新西兰没有找到的品牌。 那么也就是说，
收到传真之后，新西兰的记者开始了解这些新西兰品牌在新西兰的销售情况。在新西兰市场上销售的奶粉。
There are concerns that reports like this aired in China could be highly damaging to our dairy industry there, which is worth at least $2 billion a year. I'm joined now by Dr. Richard Phillips, Chairman of the World Civilisation Forum and Head of the Career Studies Centre of the New Zealand Asia Institute and a long-time China watcher. Good morning, Dr. Phillips. Thank you for joining us. What are the implications, do you think, for New Zealand's reputation when reports like this are aired?
They are very serious indeed. I think that the intention of the producers of these programs, of the sending of journalists to New Zealand and so forth to do these things are decisions that have been made editorially by those who are running the state media in China. So they are decisions to change or to adapt the previously very good reputation which New Zealand products had in China. So if those products are if there's any suspicion that they're not of as a higher standard as they should be, this is of major concern at this end.
So if it's Chinese state TV, what you're suggesting is that this is perhaps a political decision. This is a government editorial move.
This is definitely a government editorial move, I would argue. Nothing goes out on state media in China, nothing goes out in the state-run newspapers, which is the key part of the newspaper industry in China, which is not approved by the media team, as it were, within the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, the government policy is set by the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party sees issues which it feels are inappropriately dealt with, and I would argue that this is related to a much longer-term issue of the situation of China dealing with foreign countries. New Zealand New Zealand didn't react, in the Chinese view, appropriately quickly at the beginning of the year in relation to the DCD issue and other issues like that. And the effect is then that China is able, because of its control of the media, to make a decision editorially that the image of New Zealand will change, or the image of the way it will be treated will be changed. It won't be that New Zealand, which previously has provided 75% of the infant formula going into China without any kind of resistance from the Chinese, in fact, approval from the Chinese side, that now the decision is because the DCD issue was not dealt with appropriately, this is seen as in some way disrespectful of China, and therefore the Chinese change the way they operate.
That's interesting, isn't it? So, the Chinese uncomfortable with how we did or didn't deal with the DCD issue, and so this is a politically motivated move to just remind New Zealand about its obligations, really. Seems quite intriguing. What does that say about our relationship, that the Chinese are, it's a relationship that we pride ourselves on, and that the Chinese are prepared to criticise New Zealand?
I think that one has to look at this in terms of the immediate situation in China. They have a new team at the top, Xi Jinping as the president and the head of the Communist Party, and Li Keqiang as the new prime minister. When I say new, of course, I mean the decision to have them as successors was decided a long time ago, but they're relatively new in office. I mean, technically speaking, Prime Minister's been in office less than 6 months. Xi Jinping became the president technically only 3 months ago, or it was agreed 6 months ago. So these are new leaders. They have to make themselves appear different and yet continuous with what was there in the past. So Li Keqiang, amongst the jobs that he took on, was surprisingly, really, to be the head of food safety. He was the head of the Food Safety Committee. So he has put, for the 10 years that he would like to be in this job, he has put that as one of the things on which he has to do well. And therefore, anything that threatens him in that position, that threatens the reputation of the food safety activity, which leads back to the melamine crisis 5 years ago, where 300,000 babies were put at risk and so forth.
Because there's been 3 reports that we know of, and one, as we saw there, was a reporter saying, well, the infant formula they sell in New Zealand is very different to the brands here. Yeah. They also looked at the address that was on one of the formula containers in China, and that led them to a panel beater's shop somewhere in Auckland, which is extraordinary. What then is the reach of some of these reports? Give us an idea of just what sort of audience Chinese state TV is broadcasting to.
Well, I mean, Chinese state TV, of course, has many channels, but I mean, each program can reach hundreds of millions of people, potentially. So what is happening is that people have asked me, do the Chinese trust their media? They don't necessarily trust the positive stories on their media. I mean, that everything's perfect and so forth is not necessarily trusted. But if you have a negative story that says there's a risk in such and such a thing, why wouldn't you believe it until you got some confirmation that it was not, not to be believed? Your government is saying New Zealand products are now not as certain or not as safe as they appeared to be, or there may be some producers of these products or some brand names which are not as good as others. That puts the whole New Zealand brand at risk.
Dr. Richard Phillips, thank you for your analysis this morning.